April 1945, somewhere near the Rhine. Smoke still hangs over the ruined town like a bruise. The war is ending, but the air still smells of fear and wet stone. Inside a courtyard once filled with schoolchildren, an American officer unrolls a paper and begins to read. His voice cuts through the drizzle, clipped, official, unshakably calm. The order sounds procedural, shared quarters, integration for oversight, until the translator stumbles, her lips freezing on one phrase. The German women, lined in mud, turn toward her. She repeats it softly. They are to share beds. The silence afterward feels heavier than the gunfire that had filled these streets only a week before. The officer folds the paper, oblivious to the faces staring back at him. Hollow-eyed nurses, clerks, widows who had surrendered believing the nightmare was finally over. Behind them, the American trucks hum idly, headlights burning through the mist. For the women, it's a second invasion, this time without bullets. Reports from that month estimate over 1 million German women were detained across Allied zones, nearly 500,000 under American control. Most were not soldiers. They were auxiliaries, field medics, or simply caught in the wrong uniform when Berlin collapsed. They had been promised safety, rations, and dignity. Instead, bureaucracy twisted those promises into something unthinkable. The American guards don't cheer. Some glance at the ground. Others exchange looks that say, "This can't be right." But orders are orders. The interpreter, her voice shaking, tells the women to move now. Boots splash through the puddles. The line of prisoners begins to shuffle toward the converted schoolhouse, where the men's barracks wait. One woman's hand trembles as she adjusts the strap of her satchel, the last personal thing she owns. In her diary, later found decades after, she would write only one sentence from that night. "We thought surrender meant safety." The rain turns to mist. The officer lights a cigarette, watching as the women disappear inside. Outside, the flag still flaps victory on paper, shame in practice. The camera pans closer, finding one face in the crowd. A young nurse named Hilda, her eyes fixed on the door she's about to cross. On the other side, the order comes to life. The door closes with a hollow metal echo. Inside the makeshift barracks, a former schoolroom stripped of desks and dignity, lamplight trembles on cracked plaster walls. Rain drums on the roof, steady as a heartbeat. The women stand uncertain, clutching gray wool blankets issued hours ago. The American soldiers file in, some laughing awkwardly, others silent. The room smells of damp canvas, tobacco, and fear. Hilda sits at the edge of a narrow cot pushed against the wall. Across from her, a young GI drops his rifle belt and mutters something about orders from above. She doesn't answer. The translator's voice from earlier still rings in her head. "You must share beds." The words hadn't felt real until now. She stares at the boards beneath her boots, where mud stains bloom like bruises. Outside, the generator coughs, then dies. Candlelight flickers. Shadows stretch across the walls, swallowing the line between captor and captive. Hilda's breath catches when the soldier sits beside her. He looks barely 20, eyes red, rimmed from exhaustion. He doesn't touch her, only removes his boots and lies down, leaving half the bed untouched. The silence feels heavier than any threat. Somewhere down the hall, a woman sobs quietly into her sleeve. Reports from that summer mention over 200 mixed. Gender billets in occupied Germany. Officially, they were for logistical consolidation. Unofficially, they became spaces of confusion. Neither front line nor peace, neither mercy nor justice. Some GI whispered that it was punishment for the enemy, others that it was an administrative blunder no one dared correct. The truth, like the flickering light, shifted with every retelling. Hilda pulls the blanket up to her neck. Her stomach knots as she hears boots pacing outside the door. She remembers the Red Cross nurse's oath she once took, to preserve life, even the enemy's. Now that oath feels like a cruel joke. The soldier beside her mumbles something in English she can't follow, then turns away. The space between them might as well be a continent. When dawn comes, it brings whispers instead of relief. Across the yard, women trade stories, some of quiet respect, others of shame. None speak too loudly. Orders have ears. Outside, an officer records the night's compliance report. Inside, eyes meet, but words fail. The door opens again, and daylight cuts through the gloom like judgment. Morning crawls into the barracks like a slow confession. The air smells of wet uniforms and burnt coffee. Outside, boots crunch over gravel, but no one speaks above a whisper. Hilda wraps her blanket around her shoulders, watching soldiers pass through the yard with rigid faces. Something invisible has shifted overnight, trust evaporated, replaced by quiet unease. By noon, the rumors begin. Some women claim they overheard sergeants arguing with their officers. Others say a few GI flat out refused to obey the shared bed order. A medic swears he saw 2 soldiers confined to a storage shed for non-compliance. The story spreads faster than rations. The camp is alive with murmurs, half hope, half fear, that someone among the Americans still remembers decency. Across the yard, Private John Halper writes in his pocket notebook, his brow furrowed. No one knows yet that his scribbles will one day outlast the barbed wire. He's seen too much and can't unsee it. Confusion twisted into obedience, compassion punished as weakness. He catches Hilda watching him and gives a faint nod. It's the first time in days she's seen a man not look through her. That evening, a corporal from another unit sneaks into the women's quarters with bread and whispers, "Keep faith." It's a dangerous kindness, one that could cost him stripes or worse. He leaves before anyone can thank him. For a fleeting moment, the silence between prisoners and guards thins. But then the door slams, the spell breaks, fear settles back in. In the division's internal logs, there are records 18 formal complaints about the sleeping arrangements. Most are ignored. Command replies with the same line, operational necessity. No change required. The paper trail turns empathy into paperwork. Hilda listens to the others debate what resistance even means now. Refusal could mean punishment or transfer or worse. Yet in their eyes she sees something new, the faint spark of shared defiance. Maybe survival isn't just breathing. It's remembering who you were before someone told you not to matter. That night, Halper lights a candle and starts to write names. They deserve record. He murmurs, not sure if he's praying or documenting. Outside, rain begins again, soft but relentless. Each drop feels like a ticking clock, counting down to something neither side can stop. Night again. The barracks hums with the low, tired breathing of people pretending to sleep. In the corner, a faint candle burns beside Private John Halper's cot. He waits until the footsteps outside fade, then pulls the small notebook from under his blanket. The paper is damp, edges curling, but the pencil still works. Every line he writes feels like defiance, small, quiet, but real. He begins with the names Hilda Bauer, 20, 4, former nurse. Elise Kremer, stenographer. Lot, no surname recorded. Each entry is simple: date, location, note about conditions. He knows these words could destroy his career, maybe worse. But what's the point of victory, he thinks, if truth can't survive it? Outside, rain trickles from the gutters. Inside, shadows move as women shift in uneasy dreams. Halper pauses, listening to the slow rhythm of their breathing. Then he writes down what the officers refuse to admit. Order requires female POW to cohabit beds with enlisted men. Morale impact severe. Morality unspoken. He underlines the last two words until the pencil tip snaps. Reports later show his unit, the 315th Infantry, 70, 9th Division, handled more than 700 prisoners in its sector during the occupation months. To command, they were numbers. To Halper, they were stories bleeding quietly under the weight of orders. He hides the notebook beneath a floorboard when a sergeant walks by. Lights out, private. The man grumbles. Halper nods. He knows the sergeant suspects something but looks away. In this place, conscience is contraband. When the candle dies, darkness returns, thick and suffocating. Hilda, half awake, watches as Halper folds his hands and whispers something she can't hear. Maybe a prayer, maybe an apology. She doesn't ask. She just knows the look, the kind of shame that doesn't belong to the guilty, but to the witnesses. Weeks later, fragments of those notebooks will surface in declassified boxes, water, stained but legible. The handwriting tilts upward, urgent, as if written against time itself. One note reads, "If anyone finds this, remember silence was the easier sin." In the corner, the floorboard creaks. Halper slides the book deeper into the dark. He exhales and lies back, unaware that his small act of conscience has already become evidence. Morning fog rolls over the Rhine sector like a low, gray tide. Inside a canvas command tent, typewriter keys clack in rhythm with the rain. The officer behind the desk, Colonel Stanton, leans back, cigarette between fingers, reading Halper's latest report. He exhales smoke and mutters, "Not our problem." The typist pauses, waiting for direction. Stanton taps the paper and says, "Rephrase it. Discipline concerns. File under accommodation, logistics." That's how morality becomes paperwork. In minutes, words that should have burned through command instead dissolve into neutral phrases: lodging discrepancy, billet adjustment, interpersonal tension. Bureaucracy is a cleaner weapon. It doesn't leave blood, only confusion. Outside, jeeps idle, their engines coughing in the cold. A junior officer enters with another folder marked urgent. Inside are field complaints, first-hand accounts of the shared quarters, a policy. Some reports are signed by enlisted men refusing to follow it. Stanton flips through them without reading the details. Draft the same response. He says, "Morale issue. Handle locally." Archival records from Supreme Headquarters, Allied Expeditionary Force later revealed more than 60 such memos quietly reclassified, erased from disciplinary logs, buried beneath language designed to sound humane. The word humiliation never appears once. Meanwhile, in the camps, whispers spread that command has reviewed the issue. No one realizes that review means burial. To the soldiers, it feels like betrayal. To the prisoners, confirmation. The order has become a ghost everyone obeys, but no one acknowledges. In one intercepted letter, a corporal writes to his brother, "We're told it's normal, that integration means equality, but it feels like shame dressed in rules. That letter never reaches home. Censors remove the paragraph, leaving only talk of weather and rations. Back in the tent, Stanton signs his name at the bottom of the memo and hands it off. "Send it up," he says. "We don't need noise about this." His aide nods and seals the envelope, unaware it carries a small piece of rot in an otherwise spotless war record. The colonel glances toward the map pinned on the wall, arrows, numbers, colors showing victory inching forward. But beneath those arrows lies silence, spreading faster than any advance. The paper leaves his desk, vanishing into the system. Down the line, that silence will reach the men who once dared to speak. The next convoy of prisoners arrives 3 days later, mud, bladdered trucks rumbling into the compound. Among them is Greta, a German interpreter drafted by the Americans to bridge the gap between orders and obedience. Her English is careful, almost perfect, but today her hands shake as she holds the clipboard. The command message is clear to her, but the words are poison. She reads it twice, hoping she's wrong. She isn't. The line of women stares at her, waiting for translation. She swallows hard. You will be sharing quarters with enlisted men. She begins, voice trembling. A murmur ripples through the group. Someone asks together. Greta hesitates. The American lieutenant nods impatiently. She forces the next words out. Yes, including sleeping arrangements. The German word for beds catches in her throat like glass. Behind her, the lieutenant folds his arms. Just tell them the rules, not the reasons. He doesn't notice her eyes filling with tears. To him, it's procedure. To her, it's betrayal in uniform. Later testimony from linguist teams revealed at least 2 mistranslations during those months. Some accidental, many convenient. The phrase, shared quarters, had been softened in English, weaponized in German. It became the shield officers used to defend the indefensible. That night, Greta sits outside the barracks, listening to the muffled sounds within. She can't stop replaying her own voice in her head, twisting meaning into compliance. Words became weapons. She whispers to herself, tearing the edge of her notepad until her fingers bleed. Inside, Hilda watches as new arrivals are assigned bunks, or rather, halves of them. Confusion turns to dread and dread into numbness. When one young private refuses his assignment, stepping back and saying, "No, sir," the room stills. The sergeant's jaw tightens. "That's an order," he barks. The private hesitates, then salutes, but doesn't move. It's a quiet rebellion, invisible on paper but thunderous in the silence that follows. Outside, Greta hears the argument through the wall and covers her ears. She knows that tomorrow the report will reduce this moment to 2 words: disciplinary matter. The candle inside the barracks flickers once and dies. In the darkness, someone whispers, "We are human, yes." No one answers, but somewhere between languages, between orders and understanding, a boundary cracks. Night settles heavy over the compound, the air thick with wet earth and unspoken tension. Inside Barracks 12, a single lamp burns low. Hilda sits on the edge of her cot, arms folded tight against the chill. The soldier assigned to her space, Private John Halper, lingers near the door, silent. The new order has been read again that evening, same phrasing, same deliberate vagueness, but something in Halper's eyes says not tonight. He drops his blanket beside her, then quietly lays it over her shoulders. "You take the bed." He mutters. She stares at him, confused. "Orders," she says softly, as if reminding him of gravity. He shakes his head. "Some orders don't deserve air." Then he sits down on the cold floor, back against the wall, rifle across his knees. Outside, patrol boots crunch past. Hilda doesn't move. The silence between them feels like a fragile peace treaty, the kind wars never manage to sign. For the first time in weeks, she exhales without fear. The blanket smells faintly of soap and tobacco, small, human details that feel almost like kindness. Across the camp, similar acts ripple quietly. A GI gives his rations to a hungry prisoner. Another swaps guard duty, so his friend doesn't have to follow the rotation. They know punishment will come, but decency has already become its own rebellion. Records later revealed that 1 in 5 enlisted men faced minor disciplinary action for noncompliance with lodging rotation. The official phrase hides a simple truth. Some men refused to share beds with women who had already lost everything. When dawn breaks, Hilda wakes to find Halper still on the floor, asleep, the rifle untouched. She feels the weight of gratitude and guilt in her chest. For one night she had been allowed to exist without fear. She whispers dank, though he can't hear her. In his notebook, written later that day, Halper scribbles just 6 words. She deserved rest, not rules, enough. But mercy never lasts long in occupied zones. The next morning the barracks door bursts open. 2 military policemen bark his name. Private Halper. One says, "You're under review for insubordination." Hilda's stomach drops as he's led away, mud splashing around their boots. The rain hasn't stopped for 2 days. The camp smells of wet soil, diesel, and despair. Beyond the barbed wire, 3 soldiers dig trenches under the watch of a military policeman. Mud clings to their boots like judgment. Among them is Private John Halper, shovel in hand, eyes fixed on the ground. His back aches, but the ache is easier than the silence he left behind in the barracks. The charge reads insubordination and refusal of lodging compliance. The sentence, indefinite labor detail. He digs without protest. Each scoop of mud feels like penance for a system he can't change. Rain runs down his neck, cold and constant. When he glances up, he sees the wire fence in the distance, and behind it, Hilda standing still, watching. She shouldn't be there, but she doesn't move. The MP yell for her to go inside. She doesn't. For a second, the two just stare across the gray emptiness, no words, just recognition. Inside the command tent, the report is already being typed. The phrasing, again, is clean and bloodless. Noncompliance handled through field discipline, morale stable. In reality, nothing is stable. Within 30 days of the bed order, 72 punishments like Halper's are recorded in that core zone. Most are for men. The irony is lost on command. Punishment for restraint, discipline for decency. At dusk, the rain thickens. Halper's hands blister. He wraps them in torn fabric from his undershirt. Another soldier beside him mutters, "They broke the ones who tried to stay human." The guard hears but says nothing. Everyone's tired of pretending this makes sense. By the time the whistle blows, the trench is knee-deep, water pooling at the bottom. Halper leans on his shovel, breathing hard, mud streaking his face. Across the yard, the lights in the women's barracks flicker. Hilda's silhouette passes by the window. He wonders if she knows this isn't just punishment, it's erasure. The MP orders them back to the shed, rifles slung carelessly over shoulders. "Tomorrow, same time," he says. No explanation, no end date. Halper nods once. As he's marched past the barracks, he risks one look at the door he once guarded from the inside. Behind it, a letter is being written that will travel farther than any of them ever will. The night air is thin, sharp, and restless. Inside the dim barracks, Hilda hunches over a scrap of medical inventory paper, using a dull pencil stub smuggled from the infirmary. Each stroke feels like rebellion. Her hands tremble as she writes in small, urgent script, "To the Red Cross, Geneva." She pauses, then continues. This is not about food or rations. It is about an order that forces German women prisoners to share beds with American soldiers. We are not treated as enemies, we are treated as shame. She folds the paper twice and hides it in the hem of her coat. The plan is desperate but simple. A sympathetic medic from the convoy will deliver it when he reports to the field hospital in Mainz. If caught, she'll face solitary confinement or worse. But after watching Halper drag through the mud for doing what was right, fear feels smaller than silence. The convoy leaves before dawn. Hilda stands in line, heart pounding, as the medic checks supplies. She steps forward, pretending to steady a crate, and slips the folded paper between two bandage rolls. Their eyes meet for a fraction of a second, no words, just understanding. Then he nods, closes the lid, and walks away. Later accounts from the International Committee of the Red Cross mention 9 anonymous letters from female POW in Western Germany, received in June 1945. The handwriting varies, but the message is the same: forced cohabitation, humiliation, command silence. Most letters were unsigned. Fear traveled faster than ink. Back in the camp, Hilda waits. Days pass. No response. The women whisper that it was hopeless, that the letter will vanish like everything else. But she clings to the image of that convoy, rolling through rain, carrying her words farther than the wire, farther than command's reach. At night, she dreams of Halper, his quiet defiance, his muddy hands. She doesn't know he's still alive, still digging under the same cold rain. What she does know is this: history remembers those who speak, even when no one listens. In a distant office in Geneva, a clerk opens an envelope, unfolds damp paper, and frowns. The words are faint, smudged by rain, but legible enough to ignite an inquiry that will shake the silence. In Geneva, the summer of 1945 arrives soft and orderly, white curtains, polished floors, and the quiet click of typewriters. But when the envelope from Germany lands on a wooden desk marked confidential, the room changes temperature. A clerk named André opens it carefully. Inside, the handwriting trembles across yellowed paper. "We are forced to share beds with occupying soldiers. Please send help." The ink has bled from rain, but the meaning cuts clean. He passes it to his supervisor, who reads it twice before whispering, "We cannot ignore this." But even in neutral Switzerland, neutrality has rules. The letter moves from desk to desk, stamped and restamped, translated and summarized until its urgency feels diluted. The words humiliation and order vanish, replaced by diplomatic phrases, alleged misconduct, lodging irregularities. By the time it reaches the Red Cross Inspection Committee, 3 weeks have passed. A meeting convenes in a small, smoke-filled room. Inspectors debate tone. One urges immediate inquiry. Another warns that such accusations could strain Allied cooperation. Politics is a polite word for delay. The letter is filed under pending review. Reports indicate it took nearly 3 months before Allied command even acknowledged receipt. When they finally did, the official reply stated, "Allegations unsubstantiated. No systemic misconduct observed." There would be no prosecution, no investigation, no acknowledgement beyond paperwork. Meanwhile, in Germany, Winter begins to stalk the camps. Food thins, rations drop, and morale freezes. Hilda doesn't know that her letter reached the world's safest city, only to be silenced by good manners. She still believes someone out there has read her words and is coming. Back in Geneva, André keeps a carbon copy of the letter hidden in his drawer. He rereads it often, the smudged pencil marks haunting him. Peace has rules. His superior tells him one evening, and rules make silence easier. He doesn't argue, but that night he stays late, typing one line at the bottom of the report before filing it away. Truth delayed is truth denied. In the camp, the first flakes of snow fall against the barbed wire. The wind carries the same chill as the words that never reached back. For Hilda and the others, winter begins not with cold, but with quiet. By December 1945, the camp has turned to ice. Snow piles against the wire fences, dulling the sound of boots and orders. The war is over, yet the prisoners remain ghosts of a nation too defeated to free them, and an army too proud to admit mistakes. Frost forms on the inside of the barracks windows, thin as breath. Every morning, women scrape it away just to see daylight. Rations are down to half portions. Bread so hard it cracks like stone. Coffee made from burned barley. The stoves barely work. At night, they huddle together for warmth, no longer by order, but by need. In the darkness, Hilda feels ribs pressing against ribs, the weight of exhaustion heavier than shame. The humiliation has faded into something colder, numb survival. Medical logs from the winter list over 300 frostbite cases in this sector alone. The official reason: inadequate heating resources. Unofficially, the resources exist, just not for the defeated. The irony doesn't escape the guards either. One mutters under his breath, "We beat them, now we freeze them." He's transferred the next week. The bed order is no longer enforced, quietly dissolved after too many quiet refusals, but its ghosts linger. The barracks still carry that stale scent of fear, the kind that clings to wood and memory. Some of the women are released to labor units. Others remain without explanation. Bureaucracy keeps no promises. At night, Hilda watches snowflakes drift through the cracks in the wall, each one a tiny white flag falling too late. She thinks of Halper, wondering if he's alive somewhere, still digging trenches in the rain. Sometimes she imagines his notebook traveling farther than her letter ever did. The camp doctor, an aging major from Ohio, begins to look the other way when women steal extra blankets. "Let them," he tells his aide quietly. "We've taken enough." Even compassion feels like contraband now. By February 1946, the snow starts to melt. Mud replaces frost. The silence holds thicker than ever until one morning when the gates open without warning. A handful of guards load their trucks and drive away. The women stare after them, unsure if this is freedom or abandonment. For Hilda, it's both. She doesn't step forward, not yet. The air still tastes like barbed wire. 3 years later, 1948, America hums with post, war confidence, neon lights, and new beginnings. But in a dim apartment in Chicago, Private John Halper sits at a kitchen table staring at a mold, stained box. Inside lies the past he's tried to forget. A small notebook wrapped in a strip of canvas, edges yellowed, pages warped from rain. He unties it slowly. The handwriting tilts forward, urgent, like a man racing against his own silence. Across from him sits a young journalist, barely 30, tape recorder whirring. She had written to him after finding a footnote in a declassified military report, Disciplinary Measures, Lodging Noncompliance, 1945. That phrase led her here. Halper clears his throat. You won't believe most of it. He says quietly. She nods. Try me. He reads aloud from the notebook. The orders, the fear, the faces. He pauses at one line. She deserved rest, not rules. His voice cracks. For the first time since the trenches, he lets himself feel the weight of what obedience cost. The journalist writes furiously, her pencil tapping the edge of the notebook. When he finishes, she whispers, "You thought you were the good ones." He looks up, eyes tired. "We did. That's the tragedy. Out the window, snow falls again, same as that winter in Germany." Halper imagines Hilda somewhere beyond the ocean, older now, maybe safe, maybe not. He never saw her again after that morning he was dragged away. But every time it rained he swore he could still smell the barracks, wet wood, rusted iron, and guilt. Archival reviews decades later would confirm only fragments. 4 surviving accounts from the 315th Division mentioning the order. Most were redacted beyond recognition, but even a fragment can outlast denial. When the journalist leaves, Halper sits alone at the table, the notebook open to its first page. He writes one final line. If anyone reads this, understand, silence was not peace. Then he closes it gently, sealing memory back inside paper. Across the ocean, in a government archive in Bonn, a clerk files a box labeled POW Correspondence, 1945. Inside is a letter signed only with an H. The circle is almost closed, waiting for someone to notice. Autumn 1984. In a quiet archive room in Bonn, dust floats like pale smoke through thin shafts of light. Rows of cardboard boxes line the shelves, each one marked with numbers, not names. A historian named Clara Weiss, 30, 1 year old, opens a folder labeled POW Correspondence, 1945. She expects ration reports or prisoner lists. Instead, she finds a single envelope, its seal broken, the paper brittle with time. Inside lies a letter, written in fading pencil, signed only with an H. The words tilt sideways, hurried but legible. We are forced to share beds with occupying soldiers. Please, someone, remember. Clara's throat tightens. She reads it again, slower this time. Every line carries the weight of a voice long buried under polite silence. She turns the page over and finds a date, June 1945. At the bottom, a faint smudge, rainwater, maybe tears. Clara traces the mark with her finger, whispering, "You weren't wrong, just unheard." She looks up at the microfilm catalog, searching for cross. References. There it is, Red Cross inquiry. Lodging complaint, Geneva archive copy. She requests it, and hours later, a clerk rolls out the reel. As the image flickers across the projection screen, the 2 documents align perfectly. Hilda's letter and Andrei's annotated translation. 4 decades apart, their words finally meet. Reports estimate more than 1 million German women passed through Allied captivity, but barely a dozen testimonies survived intact. Most were dismissed, buried, or lost in translation, literally. Yet this single letter, written in fear and rain, pierces through all of it. Clara writes her own note in the margin. She only wanted truth to outlive shame. It's not an academic comment. It's an apology. When the archive closes for the night, she steps outside. Bonn's streets glow with amber lamps, the air smelling of rain, almost like that long ago summer Hilda described. Clara imagines the nurse's trembling hand, the soldier's hidden notebook, the colonel's cigarette smoke curling over a lie. History isn't a clean line, it's a loop, and sometimes It takes 40 years to close. She walks away from the archive, letter still in her bag, aware that it no longer belongs to silence. For the first time, the record finally speaks, and the world, however late, listens.